Edward had asked for a small service. No large hall, no formal procession, just the people who had actually known him. Close family, a few old friends, Pastor Williams, who had married us 16 years ago in this same building. 30 people at most. Afterward, the funeral home had arranged a small reception room adjacent to the chapel. Sandwiches, coffee, the quiet, exhausted rituals of grief. I had been standing near the window for perhaps 20 minutes holding a cup of coffee I had not touched when Victor crossed the room toward me. He moved the way certain men move when they have decided something in advance. Unhurried, certain. The kind of certainty that comes not from confidence alone, but from preparation. His wife, Diane, followed 2 steps behind. Caroline stood near the doorway. She had not spoken to me since arriving. She watched her brother cross the room with an expression I could not fully read. "Margaret," Victor said. "Victor?" He did not offer condolences. We had never been close enough for that to feel natural, and he did not attempt it now. "We should probably talk about some practical matters," he said. "I know the timing isn't ideal. We can do this later today if you prefer, but these things can't wait too long." "We can talk now," I said. He reached into his jacket, produced a folded document, set it on the table beside me without unfolding it. "Dad's will, executed in 2009, before the 2 of you were married." He had consulted someone, a lawyer or an estate agent, someone who had found the original filing and confirmed it was on record. He had arrived today not on impulse, but on preparation. That detail, the document in his jacket, ready, told me everything about how long he had been planning this. "Under that will," he continued, "the house, both vehicles, and the investment accounts transfer to Caroline and me, equally divided." He said it quietly. That was the thing about Victor. He was not a shouting man. He was a certain man. And certainty delivered calmly lands harder than volume. "You're welcome to remain in the house through the end of the month," he said. "We'll need to discuss arrangements after that." Diane stood beside him, still, hands folded in front of her. I looked at Victor for a long moment. Then I looked past him at Caroline. She was still standing in the doorway. Something in her posture had changed since Victor began speaking. A subtle drawing inward. Not disagreement, not yet, but not full agreement either. "Are you finished?" I asked. "I think that covers the essentials." "Then let me show you something." 2 years before he died, Edward sat me down at the kitchen table on an ordinary Tuesday evening. He had been quiet all day, the kind of quiet I had learned to recognize over 16 years, not sadness exactly, but weight. "I need to tell you something," he said, "and I need you to listen carefully and remember it." He told me about Victor, about 3 conversations he had tried to have with his son about the future, about the will, about the house, about what would happen when Edward was gone. Victor had ended each conversation before it properly began. He did not want to discuss it. He did not believe it was necessary. "He has a copy of the 2009 will," Edward said. "He knows what it says, and if he still has it when I'm gone, he'll use it." He reached across the table and put his hand over mine. "I've already spoken to James. Everything is handled, but I need you to have a copy. On you. Not at home. On you. Always." He looked at me steadily. "Don't argue with him. Don't explain. Just show him." I had carried the document in my purse for 2 years. Through ordinary Tuesdays and Sunday dinners, and the last months when ordinary days became something more careful, and then finally through the morning 3 weeks ago when Edward did not wake up. I had checked for it that morning before leaving the house, a habit so embedded I no longer thought about it. The envelope was always there. Edward had made sure of that. He had known his son. He had known this room, this conversation, this exact moment, and he had prepared for it with the same quiet thoroughness he had brought to everything in his life. I set my coffee cup down, opened my purse. My hand found the envelope immediately. I held it for a moment longer than necessary. There are instances where you feel the full weight of what you are about to do, not because you are uncertain, but because you understand it cannot be undone. What I placed on that table would change something permanently, between Victor and me, between Victor and his father's memory, between whatever this family might have been and what it would now become. Edward had told me not to hesitate. I placed the envelope on the table in front of Victor, said nothing. He looked at it, then at me. Then he picked it up and opened it. The document was 2 pages, certified copy. James Whitfield's firm letterhead on the cover sheet. Edward James Patterson, Last Will and Testament. Executed March 14th, 2024. Sole beneficiary, Margaret Ann Patterson. Victor read in silence. I watched his face move through the first page. The clause that explicitly superseded all prior wills, the notarization, the 2 independent witnesses. He stopped at the second page. That was where Edward's personal letter began. 3 paragraphs, Edward's own handwriting. Victor was very still. He stopped at the second paragraph. That was where Edward had written about the 3rd conversation, the 3rd time he had tried to sit down with his son and been turned away before he could finish a sentence. Victor read that paragraph twice. I could tell by the way his eyes moved. Diane, standing beside him, leaned slightly to read over his shoulder. As the document passed through her hands, her posture shifted almost imperceptibly, a small half-step sideways, away from Victor. Not dramatic, not deliberate, the involuntary movement of someone suddenly uncertain about where they are standing. Victor lowered the document. He was speaking, I realized, from an old version of the world, a version where his father had never sat down with James Whitfield in March of 2024, a version where 3 refused conversations had no consequence. That version had ended. He was only now understanding it. It was Caroline who moved first. She crossed the room slowly, stopped beside her brother. He did not look up. She read the letter over his shoulder. Then she stepped back. 1 step. Quiet. Deliberate. She looked at me. Her eyes were wet. Not from anger, from something more complicated than anger. The particular expression of someone who had known something was wrong and had not said so and was now standing in the consequence of that silence. She opened her mouth, closed it. Then she turned and walked back toward the doorway and stood there with her back to the room. James Whitfield will be your point of contact, I said quietly. His number is on the cover sheet. I picked up my coffee cup and walked back to the window. An hour later, I sat in my car in the funeral home parking lot. I did not feel triumphant. I felt exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. I was angry, not at Victor exactly. I was angry at the fact of it, that Edward's funeral had become a negotiation, that the last room his body occupied had also been the room where his son tried to erase 16 years of a life we had built together. Edward had told me not to hesitate. I hadn't, but he had not told me how it would feel afterward, how grief does not pause for practical matters, how it continues underneath everything, patient, constant, while you produce certified documents and watch a man read his father's final letter in a room full of sandwiches and cold coffee. I sat in the car until I was ready. Then I drove home, to the house that was mine. Over the following weeks, my phone recorded 58 missed calls. The first calls came from Victor directly, 3 of them inside the first 24 hours. His voice tight and controlled, questions about timelines, about the filing date, about the witnesses. Not grieving, calculating. Then the calls shifted. Victor's attorney began handling communication. The tone changed, formal, measured, the careful language of legal process. Demands became requests. Urgency became procedure. The certainty in his voice had not gone. It had simply put on a suit. Victor contested the will. James had told me he would. Plan for 6 months, James said, possibly longer, but Margaret, the document is airtight. I planned for longer. 3 weeks after the funeral, Caroline called me directly, not through a lawyer, just her number on my screen on a Wednesday morning. I answered. She did not apologize exactly. She said, "I knew he was planning something. I should have warned you." "Yes," I said, "you should have." A long pause. "He loved you," she said finally. "Dad, he talked about you differently than he talked about anything else." I did not say anything for a moment. "I know," I said. We spoke for another few minutes, carefully, 2 women finding the edges of something that might, over a long time, become a different kind of relationship. Or might not. Some things cannot be known yet. The document was real. The will was valid. The house was mine. But peace, genuine peace, that would take longer than any legal process. Edward had known that too. He had simply done what he could from where he was. Rest easy, Edward. You prepared everything you could. The rest is mine to carry. I'm carrying it. Margaret didn't go to that funeral looking for a fight. She went to say goodbye to the man she had loved for 16 years. Victor took that from her. But Edward, even from where he was, had made sure she wouldn't stand there empty-handed. That's what real love looks like. Not grand gestures, not perfect words, just a man who knew his wife well enough to protect her from something he wouldn't be there to stop himself. If this story stayed with you, if you thought of someone who loved you quietly, carefully, in ways you maybe didn't fully appreciate until later, then you already understand why Margaret's story matters. Hit that like button if Edward did the right thing. Leave me a comment. Just tell me one word. How did you feel when Victor read that letter? And if you want more stories like this, stories about real people, quiet dignity, and the kind of strength that doesn't announce itself, subscribe to Lauren's Story. Every week, we tell the stories of people who deserved better and got it. Margaret is one of them. See you in the next one.